What the Schiff is going on in Washington, D.C.? Seriously. If the Dems had the actual goods on Donald Trump for impeachment, how in the blue ever-loving hell is that the guy they actually send up to prosecute the case as the head manager in the trial in the Senate? So far, here's a really nice list of all the things that Adam Schiff has lied to the American people, his fellow congresspersons, because how dare we misgender somebody, right? And now the senators of this country, courtesy of Jim Jordan.
We're supposed to believe Adam Schiff today and everything he's saying. Remember, this is a guy who said we have more than circumstantial evidence that there was coordination between Trump and Russia to influence the election. That turned out to be false. Adam Schiff said the Nunes memo was false. Michael Horowitz told us, no, it wasn't. It was exactly right. Adam Schiff said you can trust the FISA court. Michael Horowitz told us last month, no, you can't. They lied to the FISA court 17 times. Adam Schiff told us we look forward to hearing from the whistleblower. Adam Schiff said we've had no contact with the whistleblower. And then just yesterday, the story where he misrepresents to all of you, to Chairman Nadler, and most importantly to the White House counsel, that Mr. Z is Mr. Zelensky, when in fact it was Zolchevsky. But today we're supposed to believe him. He just talked for 2 hours and 15 minutes, and we're supposed to believe everything he said today. In spite of that history, where 7 important things he had exactly wrong. So yeah, when he talks about Sondland, he doesn't tell you that was all presumption. Mr. Sondland said that when Congressman Turner asked him under oath at the hearing. So that's the kind of game they're playing here. And again, I think the American people see through it all.
So was it wrong?
All right, so that's all I'm going to say about impeachment and this whole thing, because holy crap, is this boring. And thankfully, the American people are not paying attention. Have you seen the television ratings? That's all you need to know about how much the American people take stock in this entire impeachment saga. Oh, and before I forget, by the way, you're actually tuning in to Critical Thinking with your host with the most numbers, Andrew Coppins. This your network, obviously, is Mojo 50 Radio. You can hear this show live, 5 p.m. Central Time, each and every Saturday. iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Mojo50.com. You can also see this show on the Mojo 50 Facebook page right now. And if you're listening via podcast, head over to my YouTube page following this live airing, and you will find it there. Just search Andrew Coppins. My last name is Coppens, Coppens. So if I'm not talking about impeachment, whatever shall we be talking about today? Well, I'm going to continue the theme that I talked about last week for 2020, which is changing the culture. And this is going to be a look at what we can do to change the culture of the media. It's the 1-year anniversary of the Covington Catholic situation, and we're less than a week removed from the Virginia gun rally, and boy, oh boy, has the media not learned a damn thing over the course of the past year. There were also an important set of birthdays happening within 2 days of each other this month. We just happened to miss them for last week's show. Of course, we're talking about Martin Luther King Jr. and the first American, Benjamin Franklin. So I'm going to give you some quotes on freedom, one of the 4 F's of this show, from Franklin himself. We also have a case of real authoritarianism at work, but the media will not highlight it. My Socialism Sucks series returns to combat the growing lie that capitalism is about stealing and exploitation, courtesy of the almighty AOC herself. And of course, we're going to actually, before we get into the meat of the show, don't forget about our sponsor for today's episode, American Pride Roasters. Yes, APR coffee is the fuel that drives most of this network, so blame them, at them, not me, if you don't like it. No, I'm just kidding. But I honestly cannot thank American Pride Roasters enough for their sponsorship and all that they do for Mojo 50 Radio. And, well, not so much myself in the fuel department, because I really don't drink coffee all that much. But when I do, it is APR coffee. I was able to purchase their one-of-a-kind advent calendar of coffee, and it has been a fun way to explore the different roasts and blends that my wife may like for the most part. The personal touch that DMXDM, see him on Twitter, and the entire team there put on each batch is amazing. My wife absolutely loves what they produce, and I personally enjoy the aroma the house fills with each and every time. If you're looking for historically great coffee and to support one of our own, head on over to AmericanPrideRoasters.com, AmericanPrideRoasters.com. Check out what they have on offer. Currently, they're actually running a special blend to honor the late, great Doc Thompson called On the Roof, $20, same as downtown. And I highly suggest you get yourself a bag of this coffee. What is this blend? Well, they decided a while ago that if they were going to do a tribute coffee for Doc, it would only be with the most unique and special of beans. They happened upon this Kenyan micro lot entirely by mistake, but one taste convinced them that this was the right choice. This coffee is the tastiest bean that American Pride Roasters has ever offered. Malty, molasses, brown sugar, and even a hint of raspberry are present in the cup. They only have 100 pounds, and just like the great and late Doc Thompson, once it's gone, it will be only a memory. So get yourself some of Doc as we come up on the 1-year anniversary of his passing. Yes, February 5th. 1-year anniversary. Where has the time gone? But enough of that talk. Doc wouldn't want us getting all dusty in here anyway. So just do him and us a favor and buy the greatest coffee on the planet, will ya? With that out of the way, I'm going to introduce you to another new segment for 2020, as once a month I will join forces with Illinois Policy, illinoispolicy.org, which is a free market think tank here in the state that I call home these days. You may be well aware of them if you were paying attention to the Chicago Teachers Union strike and all the work that I did with them there. But each month, going forward here, we've actually created a really solid partnership. We're going to highlight what's going on in the state of Illinois, and we'll look to bring you free market solutions to the problems and hopefully advancing the conversation beyond partisan talking points. That's right. It may be difficult to be a free marketeer here in Chicago, but there are some of us out there, and joining me today is Dr. Orphy Devungi, a PhD economist and the chief economist for the Illinois Policy Institute. Welcome in, Dr. Devungi. And I'm really excited for the partnership here between the show and the work that you are all doing to bring free market solutions to the problems in Illinois. How are you today?
Doing well. Thank you very much for having me.
And obviously, if we've got you on the show, there's a problem. So let's just define the problem here. No bigger problem in my mind exists in the state of Illinois than the financial issues, but it's only exacerbated by this problem, and that is we are dropping citizens like flies here in this state. Just how bad was the last decade for the state of Illinois in terms of population?
So, yes, Andrew, we've had the worst population decline of the decade. Only one other state has had it worse before 2019 than Illinois. It was West Virginia. In Illinois, we've lost people for 6 consecutive years now. And most of it is driven by outmigration. It's the fact that people are living longer, and so our population should actually be growing. But the fact that we're losing people to other states means that our population is shrinking. We've lost 853,000 residents to other states since 2010. In 2019 alone, there were 105,000 more people leaving the states than coming in. That's about 1 every 5 minutes. And the majority of the people moving are going to border states, which means that it's probably not the cold weather in the Chicago area that's pushing people away.
Yeah, and on the surface, that's one thing I was going to hit is that people seem to think that, oh, gee, it just must be the weather and they want to go to Florida or Texas or California and all of those things. And clearly that is not the case like you laid out there with the bordering states, the neighboring states, really seeing the most of the population gain here. But in your research, what do you see as maybe the 3 biggest factors in that population loss if it's just, crossing over the border into Indiana, Wisconsin, Iowa, so forth and so on?
So we've done some work on this, and one of the number one reason for people moving is opportunity. When you look at, so it's opportunity and it's also family, right? So moving is costly. People don't just get up, and leave unless they have an incentive to. And, when you look at the state of Illinois, what you quickly learn is that we've had the second worst personal income growth in the nation. So, if you're lucky enough to be employed in Illinois, your wages aren't growing very fast relative to the rest of the country. But we also have a unemployment rate that always hovers above the rest of the country, which means that if you're a job seeker in Illinois, you tend to wait much longer to find a job. So the combination of those two factors, right, higher unemployment duration and a very low potential income growth means that people have an incentive to go where the economy is thriving, where they're going to find jobs and basically find good paying jobs. It seems to be that Wisconsin and Indiana provide not only a lower cost of living, but more opportunity than the state of Illinois.
And one of the things that I see personally is that what the state continues to do with tax policy only makes it more likely for people to want to take those opportunities in Wisconsin or Indiana. How much of a factor do you see the budgetary process and all these increasing taxes? We've had people on in the past talking about the gas tax increase, how it went from third highest to highest in the nation. These things seem to be real tangible. And when I talk to people on the street, they seem to be real and tangible things that they consider when they're looking at potentially leaving the state and the city of Chicago, especially.
No, that's absolutely correct. So there's plenty of research that shows that when you get tax increases, you have fewer entrepreneurs, but you also have fewer businesses. Businesses don't employ as many people, and their wages of their employees don't grow very much. In Illinois, we've had 2 record income tax increases during the decade. And so the fact that people are voting with their feet and moving to other places is really not surprising at all. And also, of course, the fact that the economy is not growing very much is also not very surprising, right? So you raise taxes, and what you do is you reduce the job creation, you reduce opportunity, and at the same time, the people who stay have to, face those higher and higher bills, making the cost of living in Illinois, the cost of planting roots in the state, much higher than it was in the past. So it's for those reasons that we attract fewer residents, and that Illinoisans are going elsewhere.
So, as you take a look at what's been happening here, do you think that the government in Springfield, which is our capital, if you're not aware of that, but also here in Chicago, when you take a look at the combination of the biggest city in the state and the statewide government, do you think that they're getting why these people are moving, and do you see any relief coming?
I think that if they weren't paying attention before, they're definitely paying attention now. If you want to be able to pay the bills, by the way, the state of Illinois is facing up to $136 billion, an estimated $136 billion unfunded pension liability. And if you really want to grow tax revenues without pushing more people out, what you need is a growing tax base, right? You need more people. You need people. Economies grow because of people and their ideas. And you need people in order to to be able to pay the bills. When people leave the state, they kind of take their resources with them, right? And so I think that Springfield is forced to pay attention because there's just not enough money to go around to pay the bills anymore, and the likelihood that we'll be able to actually cover the total state debt is shrinking by the day, if not by the minute. So when we're losing people at such a high rate, it becomes more and more difficult to raise enough revenue to pay the bills. So I'll give you a good example. The people who left the state last year took roughly $12.4 million per day with them, right? So they earned $12.4 million out of the state of Illinois last year per day, which is a substantial amount of money that could have ended up helping to raise more revenue in the state to pay down our debt, our backlog of unpaid bills, etc. So it's important. It's important to have a growing population, to have a growing tax base, growing economy, in order to pay the bills. And so I think politicians are going to start paying attention in 2020.
All right. So as you say, if they are going to be paying attention, what are the three biggest things? The three biggest things the state government could really do to help reverse this trend of outmigration?
I think the biggest problem in Illinois, again, is the pension liability. Our pension liability is growing so fast that we've seen it, that basically the state has had to slash services, the delivery of core services, and to raise taxes. Right? They raised taxes twice this decade, but it just hasn't been enough to cover the growth in the pension liability. So at the Illinois Policy Institute, what we've proposed is to amend the Illinois Constitution in order to protect the benefits of the earned benefits, but to curb the growth in the pension liability. Right? If that's the source of the problem, then we need to do something about it in order to avoid future tax increases. In order also to take care of those who actually need the government the most at this current time, to stimulate the delivery, we need those services. We can't afford to lose core state services to a pension debt, to a bottomless pit, if you will, which is basically this pension debt.
Yeah. So I guess my biggest question here is, what are the proposals that are on the table in Springfield versus what you guys are proposing?
So the one thing that, unfortunately, the one thing that's been pushed by politicians this year was another tax increase. So they want to amend the state constitution to allow for progressive income tax in November, on the ballot in November. And unfortunately, this is the wrong direction to take, because we've seen what tax hikes do to the economy, right? Tax hikes have caused the worst population decline in the decade. Tax hikes have caused Illinois' income growth to be sluggish relative to the rest of the country. So what we don't need is another tax increase. Also, all the uncertainty this creates, right? So people are going to go to the polls in November, and the day after the election, they just don't know what kind of tax burden they're going to be facing. And so all this uncertainty is also going to be to cause the economy to suffer in 2020 in the state of Illinois. So that's what's on the table, and we really need to gear up and encourage your listeners to go to the polls and vote no on the progressive income tax, and instead demand for a pension constitutional amendment, because that's the only cure to our state's problems.
And you mentioned the pension, the constitutional amendment there. When you're talking about that, how realistic is that to get on the ballot and to get people behind it?
I think it's, like I said, the fact that people are voting with their feet means that they're paying attention to the state's problems. And so that is encouraging, in the sense that if people are paying attention, we are more likely to see people vote no on the progressive income tax this year. The second thing is, if people vote no on the progressive income tax this year and refuse to fuel corruption in Springfield by basically allowing them to raise taxes again and again, then the likelihood that legislators are going to come together and push for a pension amendment increases a lot. So I'm hopeful that as we push back on corruption by saying no to the progressive income tax, and more tax dollars going to politicians, we're going to see them shifting to the common sense solution, which is curb the growth in the future pension liability.
And you mentioned corruption. I think that's the story that everybody in and outside of Illinois kind of knows about the state, right? Is that there is a ton of corruption that happens here. So as you look at that, how does the average person help root that out? Because it seems like it doesn't matter if you're, switching out one Democrat for another or whatever's going on. How do you root out a problem that is as systemic as it seems to be in the state of Illinois?
I think that nobody has had a plan before, right? Nobody has actually just kind of taken this problem head on and said, we need to stop this. Right? And this is exactly why when you mention corruption, people say, well, it's always been there in the state of Illinois. Yeah, it's been there, and nobody's tried to do anything about it. At the Illinois Policy Institute, we're working with both Democrats and Republicans to introduce legislation to curb practices such as, we call that a revolving door, the ability of politicians to be lobbyists at the same time, and influence legislation that way. So we're working on those solutions. But I think the number one way to stop corruption is to stop giving money to politicians, right? So as long as we allow them to raise our taxes and give them more revenue, they can continue to dish out the revenue whichever way they feel. We've seen that. The budget process in Illinois has been broken for quite a while because of interest, special interests, one way or another, that influence the budgeting process. And so saying no to corruption is first and foremost saying no to another income tax increase. And we're hopeful that in November, Illinoisans will rise up and say no to corruption at the ballot box by voting no for a progressive income tax.
All right. Well, Dr. Orphy Devangi, Illinois Policy Institute, illinoispolicy.org. Thank you so much for joining us this month. I hope we get to speak again soon. But before we go, how can people follow your continued work in this area and much more on the economic front over at Illinois Policy?
So, yeah, you just go on our website, illinoispolicy.org. And most importantly, we want your voice to be heard by helping to put you in contact with your legislators in Springfield and tell them how you feel about the issues that plague the state. We have to go out this year and say no to a progressive income tax, no to corruption, and yes to a pension constitutional amendment.
And just so people know, if you want to get involved with what Illinois Policy is doing, head over to Facebook, check out the Lincoln Lobby. It is a great place to meet like-minded individuals and understand the things that Illinois Policy are doing, and most importantly, get activated and become active in, hopefully changing this system that has been here forever in the state of Illinois. All right, Dr. Devangi, thank you so much for joining us this week, and we will talk to you soon. And again, thank you to Dr. Orphy Devangi for spending some time talking to us. I hope you really enjoyed this segment, and I hope you're going to enjoy us talking about something local, because all politics is local. And I know there are people that really appreciate some of those things that come up, because not only does it affect us here in the state of Illinois, it may be coming to a state near you soon. So, speaking of the state, now, we see President Donald Trump called a tyrant all the time by the media, an authoritarian, and all sorts of other one-ruler terms, right? But you would think that America would also pay attention if a real authoritarian made a bold power grab in a strategically important country. Let's just, say Russia, and let's say Vladimir Putin, for example. Well, it turns out that's exactly what's happening over there, as Putin is trying any and all new ways to stay in power beyond what he has constitutionally to be able to do. And believe it or not, Russia actually has a constitution. Who knew? So late last week, Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev and the entire government just resigned hours after Putin put out a plan to change the constitution, thus giving him more power, even as he must step away from his role as president of Russia after his term is up in 2024. If you want to be taken seriously in calling Donald Trump an authoritarian, maybe might want to actually start calling out Vladimir Putin and putting the pressure and the spotlight that you have on him. Just saying. But would you look at that? Sic semper tyrannis, anybody? It's time for a break right here on Mojo 50 Radio. On the flip side, we've got a lot of changing of culture to talk about, and something about socialism sucks. I'll see you on the flip side. And welcome back to Critical Thinking. I'm your host, Andrew Coppins, your man with the most numbers right here on Mojo50 Radio. Of course, you can follow me on the socials at The Coppins Show. And if you're listening live to the show, thank you so much. But if not, and you're listening to the podcast and you'd like to hear this show, you can hear it every Saturday at 5 p.m. Central Time on Mojo50 Radio, mojo50.com, Spreaker, iHeartRadio is where you can find it live. If you want to see the show live, head over to the Mojo50 Radio Facebook page. And of course, if you want to see it in the podcast form, head over to my personal YouTube page. Just search Andrew Coppins. You will find it. And folks, we're slowly getting more and more subscribers. I encourage you to subscribe because if you do not, you likely miss my weekly Food for Thought segment. Now, this could change into something maybe more daily or whatever as this channel grows. So whatever shall we be talking about in the second half of this show? That's what you're here for, not me blabbing about social media and YouTube. Well, we're going to be talking about changing the culture, which is the theme of the show in 2020. I would argue that if you want to be able to have a positive change happening here in America, if you want to really focus on how do we get away from what is happening with all this divisiveness and derision and all that, that you really have got to concentrate on changing the culture. There are things that we must, as a culture, be for, and things that we must change. Now, one easy way to affect change and to really change the culture is to change the institutions that are affecting culture. And I would argue that no institution, if you will, is affecting our culture in a more negative way right now than so-called journalists and the media in general. Earlier this week on my YouTube channel in the Food for Thought segment, I talked about the media's outright lies and the fear-mongering that came with the Virginia Second Amendment rally that happened in Richmond. So I encourage you, head over to that YouTube page and find that discussion. It is the last video up on the YouTube page. But I'm just going to say this in general. A healthy culture, what does it do and what does it not do? Well, a healthy culture does not have a media that serves narratives to their people and fear-mongering over the truth. A healthy media culture does not presuppose a story. It actually reports on what the facts are as they happen and then allow us to understand what took place in a greater context, not what they want to tell us they think will happen. This label, right, in the Virginia Second Amendment rally of white supremacy that they claim was justified, mind you, they claim it was justified even after all of the evidence of what happened on Monday. They claim it was justified because 3 white supremacists were arrested prior to the event. Now, what they're not telling you is that the reason they were arrested was that they weren't going to be a part of the rally. They were going there to create a race war. What they were wanting to do is not blend in. What they wanted to do was go there, start shooting at the people who were at this rally, and hopefully the black people would start shooting the white people and the Hispanics and the Asians that were going to be there. All of a sudden, there's this great race war that would happen because how dare those white people shoot those black people or those black people shoot those white people? That's not what the presupposition was all about. It was all about those white supremacists showing up in support of the rally, not to fire at the rally. It instead improves that what? Insane idiots are going to be insane idiots, and we're lucky that the FBI and the police did their damn jobs here. Furthermore, it proves that what? There were no white supremacists in this rally. Now, did people show up with the Confederate flag? Yes, that happened, and that is not something that I would necessarily support. I know that there are people who say that it really is about the South and yada, yada, yada. For the large swath of the American public, that Confederate flag is about racism. It's about Jim Crow. It's about all of those things. So that is a negative. But that was the vast, vast minority of the people. The vast majority of them were law-abiding Second Amendment people who were sick of the government, and they were of all races. There were gay people. There were straight people. There were people of all sorts of different creeds at this rally. That's what the people who were white supremacists were trying to stop. They were not trying to help the rally. They were trying to use it as a jumping off point for their insane ideology. So the media gets the story completely wrong. Not only do they get it wrong in terms of all this violence that was going to happen, they get it wrong in terms of what the white supremacists were actually trying to do if they were going to be around this rally. Then let's not also forget that we're just past the 1-year anniversary of the Covington Catholic situation, which I think, by the way, means it's a great time to remind you of just how pivotal the role of media is in our culture if you didn't already know that. Just over a year ago, the media went completely nutso over Nick Sandmann, and despite video proof and other things, we still have a media that largely, by the way, believes they actually got the story right all along, even with the Washington Post having to issue a retraction, CNN getting sued out of their asses, and all the other things that were going on, New York Times and blah, 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 having to correct the story, okay? Even without all of that happening, mind you, Nick Sandmann just stands awkwardly because he doesn't know what to do when confronted by some Native American man who then makes up a story to tell the media. Anyway, friend of this program, Robbie Suave of Reason and Reason Magazine and Reason.com, recently did a great piece in the aftermath of the evidence of that story being wrong as first reported. In it, he highlights the fact that outlets across the internet have refused to back off the original and previous assumptions and have actually doubled down in some cases. But the last part of Robbie's piece is the jumping off point for this conversation that I think we need to have to change our culture around the media. Quote, Covington is a story about a viral, outrage-addicted media succumbing to a bad impulse and making horrible mistakes. But as the better-known news outlets continue to garner the lion's share of the opprobrium, it is important to remember that there are plenty of commentary writers who continue to think wrongfully and shamefully that the media had it basically right the first time. Now, why would this matter if it's just a bunch of internet outlets? It's because, believe it or not, a lot of our culture actually comes from the media. How did we get to care about stories if they're not being reported on? How do we know the name Nick Sandmann if not for the media? How do we know about Covington Catholic if not for the media? How do we care about Freddie Gray but not the poor guy or girl who was brutally murdered in the hood here in Chicago or anywhere USA yesterday? How do we know the name of Freddie Gray and not the name of those people? The media, because they chose to focus their attention on one story and not the other. I'm not saying that every murder needs to make the front page, but I am saying that narratives and therefore the culture are largely influenced by what the media chooses to tell us they're covering. As Robbie said in his piece, we have a media who's addicted to the viral story and outrage as a way to do what? Sell papers, get you to subscribe to their stuff, and then boost their numbers to get better advertising. And by numbers, I mean their ability to say 1 million people read this story, or 1 million people visited our website this day, or this month, or whatever have you. That is straight up a sickness, and it needs to be rooted out. Outrage only has a place in the media if it's outrage at a provable violation of the public trust. Viralness, whatever you want to call it, should have no place in what the media covers and doesn't cover unless that so-called viral story actually serves the public in an informative way. For instance, the Jussie Smollett situation. There would have been rightful outrage if the story was true, but rather than actually gathering the facts around the story, what did they do? They just reported on the story from Jussie Smollett as if it was the truth. They didn't do any cursory digging. They didn't go to their police sources. They didn't go to anybody and say, oh, wait, these facts are not adding up to the way that the story is being told and the way that it actually happened. That is another great example of what I'm talking about here, right? We have multiple cases of presupposition because it fits a narrative that the media likes us and wants us to believe, not ending up being true. In order to change the culture of the media, we have got to root out the actual problem. And I think it's their addiction to outrage and clickbait that is the root of this problem. But the problem also lies within us, you, me, everybody in between, okay? We have got to stop consuming this type of crap. We have got to be smart consumers of media. We have got to stop falling for this trap within the media. We've got to stop living in the instant gratification and outrage culture that we currently live in. I'm guilty from it from time to time. Just take a look at my Twitter feed during a Packer game. But my larger point is that outrage, whether it's left outrage or right outrage, let's take the tenor down, let's take a deep breath, and let's do what? Wait to get the story right. Instant gratification does nothing if the story is wrong. All it does is to serve what? Nick Sandmann is now a multimillionaire because CNN is a bunch of morons and couldn't get the story of Covington Catholic and Nick Sandmann correct. Rather than rushing to the judgment, all they needed to do was basic journalism 101 and check for other verifiable, documentable, provable accounts of what took place there. Okay? But getting over that type of a sickness, this addiction to outrage, not going to be easy for anybody, whether that's the consumer or the person providing that content. It's just like any other addiction. I honestly would encourage you to read the book Outrage by Glenn Beck. It really highlights the science of outrage. So, how do I also know that this is the case within journalism? It's my own experience in the field. Okay? I spent 10 years of my life within sports journalism. Yes, it's the online version, but I have been involved with some of the biggest names in sports journalism. I have been involved with Fansided and Sports Illustrated. I have been involved with Bleacher Report. I have been involved with The Comeback and Blogwin and on and on. Some of the biggest names in sports, online, entertainment, whatever you want to call it. I have been integrally involved. Okay? I have seen it all. I have seen how certain aspects of a story get covered, others don't. The Michael Bennett story, a great example. The outrage culture goes into full effect because Michael Bennett claimed racism. When the facts came out, let's not talk about that. You know how I know that? Because when I went to say, hey, let's hold up on this story, something is fishy here, let's get the facts, what happened? No, they didn't want to listen to me at the editorial side of things. All they wanted to do was push the story because it was clickbaitable, right? People are going to click on outrageous stories. And what is more outrageous than the claim of racism by the cops in a shootout situation? Now, there's this exhibit too, Exhibit B, Deadspin. Okay, so Deadspin was created as a sports website and then has kind of morphed into anything left-wing politics masquerading as sports as well, getting covered. They see the world through that lens. They were bought by somebody else. That somebody else, or those somebody else's, decided, nope, we're not doing politics and sports. We're going to cover the games. We're going to cover the teams. We're going to cover the X's and O's. We're going to get back to the basics of sports journalism instead of entertainment masquerading as sports journalism. Well, what ended up happening? The left-wing hacks at Deadspin, what did they do? They took their little balls and went home crying and whining and pissing and moaning the entire way. They couldn't be bothered to set aside their precious politics and sports to just cover the sport. They could not be bothered to do that. Now, the flip side of the story here is that not only did they take their ball and go home with their union and their writers guild or whatever you want to call it, Not only did they do that, but they have been actively and openly trying to go after anybody who has the gall, the cojones, the balls to go after the jobs that they voluntarily left. Anybody who dares to cross that picket line, so to speak, anybody who dares to decide that they want to be involved in just covering sports to cover sports for sports, that's wrong. You can't do that at Deadspin. If that's not a perfect example of how sick online journalism is, I don't know what else to really give you folks. So maybe this is going to be shouting into an empty room. But if you want the quickest way to change our overall culture, we, you, me, Joe Schmo on the street, we have got to change how our media feeds us our news, what they're providing us, period, and we need and deserve better from those types of people, but we also have got to demand better from them. The only way we get that change is doing the really hard thing, disengaging from the outrage and viral first culture that feeds the media beast of today. Tuning out that crap and tuning in for the truth. Look, just simply calling this type of stuff out is not going to do the trick. We've been doing that as conservative media and as, conservative and libertarian talkers and YouTubers and personalities. We've been doing that for 2 damn decades. Just calling it out, outrage of what they're doing, outrage of this. Did you see what this outlet did? Do you see what Fox put up? All those Fox rebuttals from Steven Crowder and yada, yada, yada. All of it has amounted to diddly poo. So I suggest that we don't pay it any attention anymore. It's like the guy who likes to hear himself talk in class or in the workplace. What do? You ignore them. You don't give it any air. You don't allow them to stir you up and create outrage within you. Don't fall into the trap. That's left and right, mind you. You look at the site like the Daily Wire. 90% of what they do today is clickbait. It is all about getting you outraged over the latest thing somebody on the left said. Now, it would be different if that somebody on the left was actually talking about real programs, real bills, real things that are going on. But to just get outraged over somebody sharing their opinion on something is not the way to go. There's a difference between outrage and debating the facts of the matter. And that is where we got to get back to. We have got to get back to journalists and left and right talking about facts, not opinion, not outrage over what somebody had to say. We're not Entertainment Tonight. We should not be Entertainment Tonight. We have very serious issues that we need to discuss and get over in America. And we can't do that when it's outrage 24/7. Like I said, there's a difference between having a conversation, letting people know how trash these outlets are, and then getting outraged over those stories. Let those who are actually injured by those stories, like Nick Sandmann, go after those outlets. He successfully sued CNN. They had to settle for multi-millions of dollars. You don't think all of their declining ratings, plus that, take a nice little hit to their bottom line? Right? Go after them hard. Like I mentioned in that Food for Thought segment, by the way. But don't fall into the outrage trap. Give them even more clicks on stories and more light on the crap that they're spreading. Don't give them the satisfaction. Walk away. But at the same time, we also have to have something to walk to. You can't just walk away from something, right? You talk about all these people that get red-pilled, if you will, like, Candace Owens and so forth and so on. You talk about those types of individuals. They didn't just walk away from something. They walked towards something. Whatever that something is, we've got to find it. And here's where I hope 2020 goes. more Deadspin takeovers, more focus on getting the stories right instead of pushing to be the first to it and getting the clickbait. We have got to be the change. Okay, integrity is what we need from the media, and maybe that comes from bursting their self-important bubble. That's the other aspect of it. If you want to kick out the second leg, having worked in this industry, these people are some of the most self-important douchebags you will ever meet. If you stop paying them mind and give them real alternatives instead of just opposite side of the aisle clickbait like we're seeing from the right, we get a chance to change the culture. Now, I'm going to be 100% honest. I would love to provide that to you, right? I would absolutely love to do it, but it requires capital that not a lot of people have, right? Because if you want to be able to devote the time to that real journalistic effort, to finding the truth in the stories, to finding the facts, it takes time, it takes effort, it takes a full-time effort. So if you know anybody that would love to be part of that, and if they've got some capital to put up, put them in touch with me at The Coppin Show. DM me. Really simple. DM me at The Coppin Show. Wouldn't it be great, by the way, if we were just not outraged all the damn time? I mean, seriously, stop and take a breath. We are all living some pretty spectacular lives these days, even if we're struggling. Life is by and large pretty amazing, and if you want to drive yourself into outrage all the time, that's going to be a you problem. I refuse to do it. I promise to not be about outrage, but about facts winning the day and setting the example. I won't always get it right, because there are times to actually be outraged, but it shouldn't be about a story the media is just going to give us. Let's just assume they're full of shit and move on. Now, before we move on here on the show, though, have you ever wondered how you could support Mojo 50 Radio and the things that we're doing here and enjoy yourself at the same exact time? Well, this month, we're actually running a really great promo for you cigar lovers that are out there. Go to mojo50.com, click on the donate button, donate $25. That donation will give you 3 premium cigars from the Mojo 50 cigar collection. All cigars are a Churchill size. They're 8 inches and about 52 gauge. What cigars will you get? Well, you'll get the El Jefe, a Connecticut wrapper, milder cigar, good for beginners. You'll get the Handy J, which is a Habano wrapper, medium spicy cigar, akin to a kind of a Cuban. And last but not least, you'll get the Stags, which is a Maduro, bold but smooth for the more mature cigar smoker. All cigars are hand-rolled in Tampa Bay by a Cuban who came to America 50 years ago to live the American dream. These are unlike anything that you're going to buy at the store. They have a fantastic draw, a clean burn with a nice ash. Go to Mojo50, click the donate button, mojo50.com, donate button. 3 cigars for just $25 for the Mojo 50 Daily Mojo Cigar Series. Again, mojo50.com, click that donate button, help us build capital, and most importantly, get something for yourself. So, we're going to move from the theme of 2020 to something a little more happy, and we're going to talk about Benjamin Franklin. I know we said we're going to do Socialism Sucks, but I'm going to put that on the back burner. I just can't with AOC right now, and I don't want to go all outrage on you. So, the Foundation for Economic Education, FEE, or FEE, okay? On January 17th, Benjamin Franklin, that's his birthday. So FEE came out with 17 different quotes from Benjamin Franklin, and I found them really, really great when it comes to freedom. So I just want to read them to you. Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. That was proposed by Franklin for the motto of the Great Seal of the United States. Secondly, from a persuasion that equal liberty was originally the portion, it is still the birthright of all men. Equal liberty. Number 3, every man is of common right and by the laws of God a free man and entitled to the free enjoyment of liberty. I know those shockingly evil white aristocrats of the day. Number 4, All of the property that is necessary to a man for the conservation of the individual is his natural right, which none can justly deprive him of. Number 5. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Number 6. Our cause is the cause of all mankind. We are fighting for their liberty and defending our own. Number 7. Frequent recurrence to fundamental principles is absolutely necessary to preserve the blessings of liberty and keep a government free. Reoccurrence of fundamental principles. That's a novel concept in 2020. Something that maybe we should probably get back to if we want our way back to a constitutional republic. Number 8. The more the people are discontented with the oppression of taxes, the greater their need of the prince has money to distribute amongst his partisans and pay the troops that are to suppress all resistance and enable him to plunder at pleasure. Number 9. Without freedom of thought, there can be no such thing as wisdom and no such thing as public liberty without freedom of speech. No liberty without speech. Number 10. Freedom of speech is a principal pillar of a free government. When this support is taken away, the constitution of a free society is dissolved and tyranny is erected on its ruins. Republics derive their strength and vigor from a popular examination into the action of the magistrates. Sell not liberty to purchase power. Number 12. Only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. As nations become more corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters. This one is great. Only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. As nations become more corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters. Think about socialism versus liberty with that quote. Number 13, this constitution can only end in despotism when the people shall become so corrupted as to need despotic government, being incapable of any other. Number 14, I hope that all mankind will at length have reason and sense enough to settle their differences without cutting throats. Number 15, our new constitution is now established and has an appearance that promises permanency, but in this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. Number 16, ordaining of laws in favor of one part of the nation to the prejudice and oppression of another is certainly the most erroneous and mistaken policy. An equal dispensation of protection, rights, privileges, and advantages is what every part is entitled to and ought to enjoy. And finally, number 17, Benjamin Franklin expressed the goal of Americans' experiment in liberty when he said, quote, God grant that not only the love of liberty, but a thorough knowledge of the rights of man may pervade all the nations of the earth, so that a philosopher may set his foot everywhere on its surface and say, this is my country. I think that's a great place to leave the show. Do not forget, folks, you can follow me on social media at The Coppens Show, COPPENS, COPPENS. And if you're listening live, keep it tuned in for my millennial brother from another mother. Yes, Matthew Holloway and the HollowNet are coming right up here on Mojo 50 Radio. And of course, until then, do not forget to be safe, be smart, and of course, Matthew 547.